Right.
It's all yours.
Thank you. So I always end up bookmarking quite a few poems, and then it's a little bit intuitive what actually gets spoken, you know, in the event itself. And you know, I'm aware of, you know, many of you are in New York, which has been very heavily hit in the pandemic, and it's I think there's a combination of the difficulty of loss, you know, seeing people, maybe there are people that you know close to you who've died, and or who are working on the front lines, and also the just like this thing, if you're not yourself working on the front lines, this thing of being stuck at home with yourself for long periods of time. That if you're a retreat junkie, might be quite nice, but for many people, this is a challenge. So all kinds of doubts start to come up, and you know, maybe old habits of negative thinking or self-criticism, or you know, all of these things can happen when you're kind of stuck with yourself for long periods of time. So it's really important to know that that's what can happen, and that these are the hindrances that the Buddha points out very clearly, the 5 hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, sleepiness and dullness. You know, that can be another one, not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, not really seeing the point, you know. Restlessness and agitation, worrying about things, and doubt. So there's a lot of uncertainty at this time. There's a lot of uncertainty all the time, actually. It's always uncertain. But it appears to be more certain most of the time than it appears now. And now it's like blatantly uncertain. So it's just now it's normal not to be able to really know what your plans are going to be, you know, in a few weeks' time. Whereas you know, 6 months ago that would have been seen as a little odd. So it's in some ways where we're being faced with reality more clearly than we are usually. So I think it's very important to take care of oneself, you know, to take care of your heart, and not to get pulled down into those hindrances, and to know them for what they are, and then to actively cultivate the awakening factors. So the awakening factors are one of my favorite teachings, because they lead us to awakening. So I'm going to read this poem, and it's the poem of the Bhikkhuni Jenta, and her name means conqueror. So this is about conquering the illusions, conquering Mara, conquering the defilements. And this is her enlightenment poem. I was forever getting lost, until one day the Buddha told me, to walk this path you will need 7 friends: mindfulness, curiosity, courage, joy, calm, stillness, and perspective. For many years, these friends and I have travelled together, sometimes wandering in circles, sometimes taking the long way round. There were days when I thought I couldn't go on. There were days when I thought I was finally beaten. It's scary to give all of yourself to just one thing. Oh, my heart, you don't have to go it alone. Train yourself to train just a little more gently. So I'm going to read that a second time. I was forever getting lost, until one day the Buddha told me, to walk this path you will need 7 friends: mindfulness, curiosity, courage, joy, calm, stillness, and perspective. For many years, these friends and I have travelled together, sometimes wandering in circles, sometimes taking the long way around. There were days when I thought I couldn't go on. There were days when I thought I was finally beaten. It's scary to give all of yourself to just one thing. What if you don't make it? Oh, my heart, you don't have to go it alone. Train yourself to train just a little more gently. So I think this is a very significant and important poem. So it brings in those awakening factors, and we're used to hearing them differently. So this is Matti he translated these poems from the Pali, so he's proficient in Pali, and he wanted to find words that were really fitting for the Pali word, for these 7 awakening factors. So mindfulness, we all know, sati. Curiosity, Dhammavicaya is in the Pali, and that's often translated as investigation of dhammas or investigation of states. And then curiosity, and then courage. I like that translation. Courage is virya, it's a translation of virya. And virya is usually means energy or a sustained effort, like staying with something. So it's the courage to stay with it. So first of all, we bring mindfulness to what's going on. We move out of the kind of, blur of being semi-present, and we move into mindfulness. And we're with what's going on now. It's always now. It's always this, whatever this is. And then we bring that sense of curiosity. Oh, what's going on now? So, like with the breath, when we're mindful of the breath, it's like the most ordinary thing in the world. It's always been there. It's going to be there all our life. It's going on whether we notice it or not. Very rare occasions we might be aware of it because something happens that makes it hard to breathe, or we have a shock or something. But generally, it's just very, very ordinary. And then we bring sati, bring mindfulness to the breath, and then it's like, oh, so what is going on there? So curiosity is that sense of interest and listening. So if there's just sati, just like knowing, it's not enough. It's not going to get you enlightened. Knowing is better than not knowing. It's important. But just knowing without that sense of, what is that? What's happening? That extra quality, that's like the insight quality. So it gets us interested, gets us curious, brings our attention more close to what we're experiencing. And then courage is the courage to stay with it. I love that translation. Usually it's energy or effort. Effort sounds tiring, but courage is like, okay, rise up. Okay, I can stay with this. That's what is there to be learned? What is there to be understood from this that's happening now? This situation right now, this body, this mind, this life right now. And then joy, piti. So joy is an awakening factor, a factor of enlightenment. And the Buddha so strongly emphasizes the importance of cultivating wholesome mind states. And it's so easy to just fall into negativity, a doubt, or just like a dullness, not wanting to be bothered. There's many ways we can just like fall into negative mind states, or criticism of others, or resentment, fear, all of those things. Greed. And then the Buddha's saying, most important, cultivate wholesome mind states. Cultivate generosity, cultivate patience, cultivate compassion. So any of those situations that we might meet where the mind starts to spiral into the negative, as it can do, then we need to And you just catch that and see, what can I cultivate? What's the flip side of this? So, when we bring attention, sati, mindfulness, and dhammavijaya, curiosity, and virya, courage, to our experience, even if it's difficult, even if our experience is really difficult, then a joy arises. So I can remember sitting here in our library with a very, very deep sadness, just this really strong sense of grief, welling up through me, and then using those three qualities, bringing sati, awareness, being interested. Oh, what's this? And what does it feel like? And how's it moving through me? And then staying with it and staying with it and staying with it in that interested way. And then I started to find simultaneously a sense of joy. So there's this grief and at the same time a sense of joy. And it's like the joy of the awakening factors, because it's the joy of seeing things as they are, the joy of being aligned with reality. So joy is like a result. So those first three we can bring up, we can do those, so to speak. We can bring them to mind: sati, mindfulness, curiosity, and courage. And then joy is like what arises from that. And then calm. So knowing when it's time to calm the mind, settle the mind. If there's too much agitation, calming. And then stilling. So calm is passaddhi, the Pali. And stilling is Matthew's translation for samadhi. Samadhi, often translated as concentration. Concentration has a lot of doing and narrowing and efforting. Stillness, stilling the mind. So allowing the mind to settle and still when it's agitated. And then perspective. So this is a translation for upekkha, which is usually translated as equanimity. I always think equanimity is a bit of a problematic word. For one thing, only Buddhists talk about it. It's not a word that's used generally in the world. And it gives this sort of impression that everything's kind of really flat. Everything's supposed to be flat and even. Or even like distanced. Not, I'm equanimous. It's got this sort of aloofness. Whereas perspective this is a bit more of an accurate, I would say, translation of the Pali word, which is using the image of a bird's eye view. So a bird flying over and looking down on everything. It's part of, it's influenced. If it's flying over a cliff, it'll be influenced by the thermals there. So it's not separate from, but it's got a perspective, got a big view. So these are our friends, And then the Jenta saying she was forever getting lost. And then one day the Buddha said, to walk this path, you need these 7 friends. And so then she starts to spend time with those friends for years. I love that. For many years, these friends and I have traveled together. So she's fully enlightened nun. And when you're fully enlightened, I would imagine that these naturally arise. But until then, we remember to take care of those friends that are close by all the time. And then, it does feel like that in the path. Sometimes we're wandering in circles. We feel like, oh my goodness, I'm back here again. Didn't I learn this before? Didn't I get this insight before? I'm back here again. So this is, it seems like circles, but really it's like a spiral. We start confused, and then we practice and we study and we start to understand the teachings, and we have good friends and we change the way we live and things are going really well. And then we find that we're back here again with these difficulties we had before. How did that happen? And then we might feel like, oh, it's just not going anywhere, but it's a spiral. So we're back in that place we were before, but we're not in the same place because we're there having cultivated all of this, wholesome qualities and letting go and good friends. But then there are layers of karma, you could say, layers of stuff that we need to work through. And it doesn't necessarily fall away easily. So we might get really excited for a while and think we're doing really great, and we are doing really great, and then we come back to work on that again. So then we work on that for a while, and we keep cultivating using these 7 friends. And then things start to get better for a while, and things get clearer, and we understand more, and then things are going really well, and we feel like wonderful, so clear. The Buddha's teaching is so clear. It is so clear. And then our karma again, and it starts to get, we start to have to work through those things, those obscurations. So to trust the path, it's a spiral often for many people. It's not a nice, neat line that goes from here to here. And then remember, appreciate the work that you've done. Appreciate the good friends that you have. Appreciate that you're part of this Sangha right now, even, And so nourish the good, nourish the good in you, and nourish the good like the Dhamma, really, in your life. And sometimes taking the long way around, it's like, it's inspiring when you meet people. I know 1 or 2 people who are just like, they're taking the direct route, and I look at them and I think, oh my goodness, I feel a little bit, oh, my practice isn't so good, comparing. And then, well, sometimes you have to take the long way around. Sometimes it's like that. But as long as you're going in the right direction, that's what's important. So Bhikkhu Bodhi once said there are only 2 things necessary for realizing the path, for realizing the goal of awakening. First, you start on the path, you start practicing, and second, you don't stop until you're enlightened. So you just have to start and then not stop when all is well. And you may, sometimes it doesn't look the way you think it should look. Just keep going. And then she says, there were days when I thought I couldn't go on. Perhaps you've had days like that. There were days when I thought I was finally beaten. I've certainly had days like that. And then you find you get up again. There's something in you that just says, okay, rise up. There's more to be done. And then it's scary to give all of yourself to just one thing. To give all of yourself to this path of awakening. It's scary, but it's kind of to not do it. Maybe it's even more scary. What if you don't make it? Oh, my heart, you don't have to go it alone. Train yourself to train just a little more gently. So getting to know the places where you are too hard. So there's a strength and a determination needed in the practice. We need a certain discipline and a rising up and a letting go. This is vital. But just recognize that there may be places in your practice that are where the judge is too hard, where there's too much shoulding and not enough appreciating. So appreciating is an important part of your path. Appreciating the good that you are doing. Appreciating the way you orient your life. Appreciating the changes that you've made in the right direction, the things that you've let go of, that were pulling you back. And then, we're not arahants yet. Also just acknowledging that. Sometimes you can want to be further along the path than we are, and then you just say, well, I'm here right now. This is where I am. What do I need to do with this? And that's bringing it back in mindfulness again, bring it back to what is happening here and now. So the training is a steady training. You need that overarching goal of the practice. If you don't have a sense of wanting to give yourself to the practice, whatever way that may look, then, we do a little bit, then we go and do something really stupid, and then we do a little bit more, and then we forget. And it's very, very slow, and we maybe kind of backtrack a lot. So it's important to have the overarching goal and to know the potential of a human life, everyone's life, and then keep training, but just a little more gently. Let's see who wants to speak next. Oh, yes. So this is the poem of Bhadra, Lucky, Bhikkhuni Bhadra. You always considered yourself lucky because things seemed to work out the way you wanted. Now, luck has a different meaning. Lucky to be walking a path that finds peace in the arising and passing away of each present moment, regardless of how things work out or don't. Lucky to be walking a path that finds peace in the arising and passing away of each present moment, regardless of how things work out or don't. So this is a very important message because the world always tells us to try and line things up, get things to be the way we want, and then you might have some times in your life when things go really well and it feels great and you feel really lucky, and then the Dhamma is pointing to a much greater freedom than that. You don't have to be constantly trying to make the world line up to the way you think it should be for you. It's a very small view, but it's more like opening to things as they are, accepting life as it is. And that's not a doormat experience, but it's an alignment with reality. So nobody wants a pandemic. It's a huge deal for the whole world. Maybe the earth itself having a little breather from us. But the human beings here, nobody's like super elated that there's a pandemic going on, but there is a pandemic going on. So taking issue with it, being upset about it is not helpful. And, it will have affected, each person's life is affected in a different way. And it's like this right now. So, and we don't know how it's going to be in the future. So there's that uncertainty. And that's part of how it is right now. So it's an aligning with the reality of this ever-changing world, ever-changing experience. And then letting go into the not knowing. So Ajahn Chah, who's like my spiritual grandfather, he would often say, "Meine is not certain." People would ask him, "What about this? What about that?" And he'd say, "Not certain, not certain." And that's aligned with reality. It's not certain. It's not certain if we're even going to make it through the whole of this teaching. It's not certain if we'll have another breath. It's not certain if we'll, who knows what will happen, if we'll get enlightened in this lifetime or future lifetimes. It's all uncertain. So just aligning with that reality of uncertainty. So I'm just flicking through this book a moment. So I always mark them, and then there's always one that I wish I'd marked that I haven't marked. So it is. I want to read this other poem, Upasamma, calm. Excuse me. And this is a poem for, in a way it's a poem for the path, and it's also a poem for those really difficult times. And it has the image of a river, crossing a river. Upasama, calm. How do you cross the flood? You cross calmly, one step at a time, feeling for stones. How do you cross the flood, my heart? You cross calmly, one step at a time, or not at all. So I'm going to read that again. How do you cross the flood? You cross calmly, one step at a time, feeling for stones. How do you cross the flood, my heart? You cross calmly, one step at a time, or not at all. So I think this is a very beautiful poem, and I always think this is the poem to keep in your back pocket, to pull out and read at those difficult times. How do I cross the flood? And then there's, in the image, in the sutras, there's the flood of samsara, obviously. The great flood of samsara, or the flood of sensuality, or the flood of anger. It's like the asavas, the outflows, or the influxes, the floods. So it could be like, how do you cross the flood of samsara? Or how do you cross the flood when strong desire is arising, or strong anger is arising, or strong confusion is arising? You cross calmly, one step at a time, feeling for stones. So if you get caught up in the energy of the hindrances, it's like you get swept away in the flood. But if you stay grounded, if any of you have ever crossed a river, you'll know how it is. You're walking across the river, and you're trying to cross ford a river, and the water's pushing against your legs, and you're having to very carefully take a step. So you think really carefully before lifting your foot, because you might just get swept away. So you get yourself really grounded, and then you very carefully lift your foot, and you look for a stone that's not slippery. And then you put your foot down, you move your weight onto that foot, and then you lift your next foot. And very carefully, very calmly, you walk across the flood. And then just that one step at a time. I think that's also very important, because we can get impatient with the practice. We can feel like we're not, maybe sometimes it feels like, oh, that's not really working, I'm not really progressing. And it can feel like that when you're crossing a river. You might, if it's a wide river, it can take a very long time. And you might wonder, am I even going to manage? And you just gradually, one step at a time, make your way across. That reminds me of a sutta, which I think is in the Majjhima Nikaya, about a cowherd. The cowherd's trying to help get his cattle across the river, and and there are bulls and heifers. I don't know if you're from Wales, so this is all normal to me. You might not know in New York. So there's the bulls, and then there's the heifers, the cows, the mothers, and then there's the bullocks, the young males, and then there's the heifers are the young females, who haven't yet had a calf. And then there's the little calves, and they're all there in the herd. And then the cowherd, he gets them to a place where the river is the lowest, but it's still still kind of fast. But he gets to the best place he can cross. And then first of all, he sends across the bulls, the big ones, because they're always big, huge, the bulls, and they get across. And then that encourages the cows, the mothers, to get across. They're also bigger, so they are also encouraged to cross. And then the bullocks, they're a little bit younger, a little bit smaller. are encouraged to cross. And then the heifers, the younger female ones, which are not so strong, they also get across. And then there's the little calves, and the simile is describing the path of awakening. So the bulls are like the arahants, fully enlightened ones. So don't get too upset about the gender here. It does actually kind of fit when you look at cows and stuff. So the bulls are the big ones, and the arahants who can most easily get across that flood, that river. And then the cows, they're like the anagamis, the non-returners, those who have freed their hearts from greed and hatred, but they're not fully enlightened yet. And they also get across. And then the bullocks are like the once returners, those who have lessened greed and hatred, those who have realized stream entry at some point and then have lessened, attenuated greed and hatred. So they're on the second stage of awakening, and they get across. And then the stream entrers, the heifers, they get across because they're encouraged by the arahant and the anagami and the sakadagami and so on. And then the little calves, and then it says, and even the little calf, just born that day, hears the call of its mother, it's the cow. And even the little calf, just born that day, is able to get across the river safely because it's encouraged by the others who've got across. So this is very sweet. And the little calf that's just born that day, this is like what the Buddha speaks about, the Dhammanusaris and the Saddhanusaris, those who are following the Dhamma through, following the path through, and maybe more of an intellectual understanding, a clear understanding of the Dhamma. So those will be those who are more intellectually oriented to the Dhamma. And then the Saddhanusaris, those who are following the Dhamma through faith. So often we have a bit of both. But there are some who lean more, I'm more of a faith-oriented. That was my way in, was through faith, not through intellectual understanding of the teachings. And that came later. The faith is what got me in, and then the understanding came later. And then for those who enter through intellectual understanding, because the Buddha's teaching is so beautiful and so brilliant, you read it and you're like, wow, and it seems so easy actually if you understand it in that way, and then you have to actually practice it. You actually have to cross that river, and that's not as easy as it first looks. So for those who enter through faith, the understanding deepens over time, and those who enter through Dhamma, the faith deepens over time, and they come together like this. And so we're all in a way on that journey of we might be just at the edge of the river looking across, or we might have our feet wet, or we might feel the pressure of the water against our legs as we're trying to keep going, or we might be nearly across. I mean, there's over 100 of you watching this. There could be some people there who've already crossed the river. That would be a wonderful thing. But wherever we are on the journey, we just stay centered. Remember to be centered. Take one step at a time. Be discerning. So it's not cautious. It's not. If you're too cautious, then you stay too long, and then you get swept away. You've got to keep moving, keep practicing, keep training. Take your good friends with you, your 7 friends. And, gradually we make our way across this flood of samsara. And the beauty also of that teaching is that the cowherd is like, he's herding all the cows together. They're herd animals. I think we are also herd animals. We're not. There's a few people who like to go off and be alone, but generally, we like to be with other people. So this is like sangha. It's our sangha. We draw on the strengths of each other, and some have we'll all have different qualities, different strengths that we can draw on and we can offer to each other. So I hope there's something useful in what I've offered tonight. And I'd like to open up the, what do we call it, the screen, I suppose, not the room, for questions. If anyone has a question.
Thank you so much, Ayya. So what we're going to do with the questions is going to ask you to raise your hand, which you have to do in the participant screen. So you have to click on participants, which is at the bottom of your screen, if you haven't figured that out already. And at the very bottom of the participant screen is an opportunity to raise your hand. So you will raise your hand, and then I will call you and we will unmute you. And you'll put your voice in the space and ask your question or make your reflection and comment and go from there. So anybody who would like to raise their hand, now is the chance to do that.
So Lily Mayer raised her hand. Raised their hand.
I don't see it raised here. That's so interesting.
Interesting. So what do I do? Can I just...
So I think, what's the name? You can unmute her, yeah, if you see her.
Yes. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming to be with us tonight. So touched by this book. I had the chance to meet Maddie, and I love these poems, this translation. And I was actually going to be on retreat with you last week up in Massachusetts for this. So glad to be with you tonight. I think it was really cool that you brought up arahants, and I don't know if this is a naive question, but it seems like there were so many 2,500 years ago. Are there just as many wandering around today? Are the conditions of the world so different that there aren't as many, or we just don't hear about them as much? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to know, because they say it takes one to know one. So there are people who claim to be enlightened and who may or may not be, and there are people, so as monastics, we're actually not supposed to tell people what our level of attainment is. It's one of the rules we have, is to not speak about it. So there are people who are seen to be, or who are believed to be fully enlightened, and they're not going to verify that verbally.
Oh.
So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit mysterious. So I definitely know of people who are highly realized, yes, but whether they're an arahant or not, I couldn't tell you. And compared to the Buddha's time, it is very different. So they say, like with the conditions for a Buddha to arise in the world, for one thing, people were seeing and meeting and witnessing a Buddha, and that is profound. So I often speak about when I met Venerable Mahagosananda, who was not a Buddha, but he was a very highly realized being. He was probably either a heifer or a bull in that little story. Not a heifer, a cow or a bull. So either an anagami or an arahant. Definitely very different to anyone else I'd ever met, apart from perhaps the Dalai Lama. Those two people really stood out as extraordinarily different to anyone else I'd ever met. And when I met him, just being in his presence, I met him 3 times, being in his presence woke things up in me in a profound way that didn't happen when I was with other people or reading the sutras or meditating. So I would think that actually being in the presence of a Buddha would kind of ripen your good karma quite a lot. Yeah. So I think that would be part of it. And, karmically, it could be that, they say that people make these determinations, like, may I be reborn in the presence of the next Buddha. And there may have been many people who made that intention, and then in that life, there they all were. And also in India, there are many people. There are many people who practice. So there's a lot of practitioners. So even though the Buddha's teaching, the Dhamma wasn't yet. The wheel of Dhamma hadn't started turning until the Buddha started teaching, and Kondanya realized stream entry. That was the beginning of the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, which is still turning today beautifully after all these 2,600 years. but there were a lot of people practicing, so doing ascetic practices or meditation practices. There's a lot of practitioners actually, but they didn't have that extra insight into not self. So there are many people who'd really like refined their minds and their lives. And then when they saw the Buddha or heard the teaching, it just took that little tip. Whereas these days, it's, the world we live in, America, it's consumerism and capitalism, and it's not oriented in that. We're not oriented in that way.
But if enough people made the determination to live in the time of a Buddha, maybe we could change the world again.
I mean, that is one way, but I think it's better to practice and to aim for stream entry. Actually, aim for stream entry now. Then you're on your way out, and then you'll help other people. Because who knows when the next Buddha arises? A Buddha will only arise when the Dharma has been completely lost. So, do you really want to hang around that long?
Wow, I didn't know that either. And I'm so touched that these enlightened women left words for us. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.
So Jill has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. I loved Maddie's interpretations of the Pali, but when I look up some of these words in the Pali English dictionary, I don't see stilling or courage, for virya. And I just wonder about the danger of the Pali, getting loosened or our spin, our language interpretations put on the Pali and the whole mindfulness movement, and how the Pali is losing some of its power, for want of a better word. Yeah.
I mean, I think it loses its power as long as there are people, as long as we take an English word and take that to be the real translation, then it's lost its power. Because the Pali, we're trying to translate a word that's from a different culture and a different time and a practice word also into English, which is not a Dharma language, it's not a practice language. Right. So so like in Sri Lanka, in Sinhala and in Thai, Dharma is woven into the ordinary daily language. So it's much easier actually to translate into those languages. But in English, it's not. There's in the creation of the language of English, there was no Dharma. There's some things that you can align to, but I think it's actually very important to. Somebody like Matti, he is proficient in Pali actually, and he took real care, and we talked through some of them, particularly the last one, Upeka. We talked through that of would that fit, and is that appropriate, and so a lot of care was taken actually in those translations, and from the original Pali, and not just from an English translation of the Pali. So I think it's actually more beneficial to have these different translations. So like stilling. For example, samadhi first got this translation concentration, and I think that word, that translation, has been more trouble than help. Right. It's not really an accurate. And then other people say it's collectedness of mind or stilling. Actually, I think Ajahn Brahm says to stilling. I think that's a word translation that he uses. So it's also one practices, and Matti has both practice and the Pali. So one practices and then you see, what is it? Okay, this is samadhi. What English word would I find for that? What would I put on that? And then it's like, okay, stilling, that feels right. And it's not, and it's also many of these words in Pali, they don't have just one translation. It's not as simple as that. Yeah. There might be a few that will feel like, that point to the actual experience. So I would say it's the opposite. Having these different translations, it makes people go, oh, hang on a minute. I always thought it was equanimity, and then so what does it mean actually? I also have a friend in England who's a Sanskrit scholar, and she was also giving me translations of Upeka in Sanskrit, and she had this image of the bird flying and looking down. So it has like perspective and a slight distance. So that's in the word. So I think it's great to have different translations and then to explore them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So Aaron has a question. Analio translates Upeka as equipoise, I think, right?
Equipoise, yeah.
Is another.
You know, these are words like, who uses words like that? This is the trouble, you know. Only Buddhists.
True. Good point.
Equipoise. I mean, nobody ever speaks about things like that.
Good point. Yeah.
Perspective.
So Aaron, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, thank you so much for the beautiful poems. I'm curious, you know, reading some of the Buddhist teachings and also even in what you shared, the male view of enlightenment, perhaps, if that shows up. And I haven't read the book of poems, but I'd be curious to know if you see a different view of the path or a different way to even approach it that is more grounded in maybe female energy.
Do you mean in the poems or in my practice or what?
I guess both.
I mean, in the poems, I see it very much, you know, because it's, and you know, there are also enlightenment poems of the awakened monks also, they've also been passed down, but they're more sort of pragmatic. And what's beautiful about these poems is that you get to feel you get to know a little bit of the life of the woman who becomes enlightened. And what I found really very inspiring and helpful, actually, and encouraging, is there are all sorts of women here. There's all sorts, you know, there's like really smart women who just like get it really quickly and have, you know, come from good families, and then there's like princesses who've like had everything laid on and then leave it behind, and there's prostitutes and beggars and old people and young people, you know. One of them is like so desperate she goes to hang herself from a tree because she just feels like it's just impossible, and then she's been practicing all these years and not a moment of concentration, and then as the moment the rope touches her neck, she becomes enlightened. Don't try this at home. She becomes enlightened, you know. And so you just get the sense of like, because sometimes in the sutras it's like, do this, do this, do this, and then you'll become an arahant, you know. Do this, do this, do this, and you become a stream enterer. And then these poems, they are more human, really. So they're saying it's messy sometimes, you know. Sometimes you can go for a long time without really feeling like you're getting any fruits. And sometimes you have to work really, really hard for a long time. Like Dhammadina, I love that poem. The image is like she's paddling down a river and trying to get to the end, trying to get to the ocean, and then one morning she stops and she puts her paddle down and she watches the sun rise over the eastern hills, and then she finds herself floating upstream. So she suddenly realizes, she suddenly becomes enlightened, and then she's like, oh, I promise it was not what I had expected. So these kind of beautiful images where I think in the masculine approach, often it can be presented as, you know, a bit more linear. You know, you do this, and you get this result. And in these, it's more messy. And I really like that because life's messy. So, and I love that it's such a mix of people from all different walks of life, you know, and they all become arahants. So I feel like that opens the door for all of us. Yeah.
I have a question about.
So sorry. Please, John.
Just while we're waiting for others, just the last line of the flood poem.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which you didn't actually address, and I'm wondering what.
Or not at all.
Yeah.
Well, if you get swept away, you don't cross, do you?
If you get swept away, yeah, or you just sort of.
Yeah. How do you cross calmly, one step at a time, or not at all? So, if you don't keep that centeredness and that steadiness, then you get swept away. You don't cross, you just get swept away into the river. So, and now I'm also, just to say, I was just talking about Dhammadina, she's using the image of a river going to the ocean, which was more like the practice leading to enlightenment. And then this is more like, because they're both river images, but they're just used differently. This is more the river, the flood of samsara. You know?
Yeah.
So you know, but then you get swept away, and then you grab hold of a rock somewhere and you pull yourself out.
Right.
And then you start.
Or you choose not to cross just that at that moment, you know, which is like, I'm not there yet, or I'm not ready, or I'm not.
Yeah, get
but
stronger.
I like the idea of grabbing something on the way, and yeah, okay. Thank you. Kathy, you're unmuted. We're trying to unmute you. There you go.
Am I unmuted? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm curious about the notion of fruits. It seems like much of the practice is actually, and maybe it's just in the tradition I'm from, that it's not about merit or goal. And so I'm curious, how do you balance? I mean, when I think about my practice, I don't think about getting anywhere or obtaining anything like that. So I'm curious, but at the same time, I'm not really sure then what motivates me to keep coming back, but I just keep coming back. But talk a little bit about fruits and no merit, and I'm struggling with your concept of fruits, I guess.
Okay, well, it's the Buddha's concept, actually. I'm just relaying stuff from the sutras. But, well, you know, what I can say is when I first started to practice, I didn't want to hear about those things. I was in the monastery, you know, and I don't talk to me about, I don't want to know about stream entry. I don't want to hear about jhanas. Don't tell me about any of that stuff. Because I knew that if I knew about it, my mind would start grasping. And then when the mind starts grasping, you're going in the opposite direction to where you want to go. So there can be a skillful means, actually, in not having those goals, if you want to call it that. I don't know, for want of a better word, or those markers. It can be skillful to not have them in mind, and I definitely didn't want them for quite some time. And that allowed the freedom for this practice just to throw itself into whatever was going on and to experience the fruits of that naturally, without some idea of trying to get something. So it may be the right way, and also actually for the sadhanasaris, for the faith-oriented people, it can be very good to not. It can go both ways, actually, but it can be very good to not have those markers, you know, and then you're just giving yourself to the practice. So it's just a way of seeing things, and the Buddha speaks about these 4 stages or 8 stages, whatever, and they are. I think it's good to know that it is possible. It is good to know that it is possible to realize full awakening, and that the actual that when he lists those 4, and then for each one there are certain what he calls fetters, certain things that hold us back that are cut. So in the first one, there are 3 fetters that are cut, and once they're cut, they're done, and then it's a fruit of the practice. And that gets the name stream entry. It's just a name for a place on the path where there's a certain delusions have been cut through, and then there's other stuff that's still playing out. And then the second level is still, you know, there's nothing actually cut through. Actually, it's just been lessened. And then the third stage, greed and hatred are cut through. There's no longer arise, and that's profound, you know, and that's the potential of a human being. So, and I've met people who have realized that, and it's very, very powerful. When you see those people, it's very, very inspiring and powerful. So it's good to know that is possible. And then the arahant is one who's free from any kind of delusion, any kind of restlessness, anything that's going to cause a problem, and that's freedom. So it's good, it's beautiful to know that that's possible. But then I think the way we think, you know, we think in terms of being somebody going somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's me, who, you know, how I am now, and then the story about where I am now and how I am now, which might be good or might be not good. And then there's the, oh, so I want to get stream entry, so I'm going to try and become a stream entry. So that's like, in a way, totally the wrong way around, because then you're trying to become something. And all of those layers, levels of awakening are the person who's realized them has let go of something. They haven't got anything extra. There's nothing extra gained. There's no goal that one has attained. It's, you've let go of some delusion. And then you let go of another layer of delusion. And then you let go of all delusion. And then you're free. So to think of it that way is probably more useful.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So we have another minute or two if anybody has any remaining questions or. And it could be that people are nervous to put their voice in the space, so you can also.
I used to be so terribly shy, and I have to often speak in front of people. Please.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's. I don't think you can call it public speaking when it's like this, right? Because you know you're just talking to your computer, but yet here we are.
But you know, and also I just want to talk about these lofty things. If you got something about just about your practice.
Okay, we have Aditi.
Okay.
So we just got it. There you go.
I'd go ahead and ask.
You have to speak up, Aditi.
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
It's very low, so speak.
Very low. I had this problem once.
That's better.
So I have a question that's pretty basic. It's those levels, and you might have mentioned it in this last response, but I got distracted. I don't think I'd ever heard of those levels before, and I found that very fascinating. So there's Arahant, but then
Anagami means non-returner, one who doesn't return back to this sense realm. And then Sakadagami, one who returns to this realm, to the human life one more time. And then there's Sotapanna, which is a stream enterer, which is one who's seen the Dhamma clearly for what it is, and for a very, very short time has basically seen with the eyes of an enlightened being, but then still has karma to work out, still work to do. And then there's those are like those four cattle, and then there's the little calves who are just looking in and making steps. It's like most people.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't hear you. Why is she not? So she's muted. Unmute Aditi. Unmute.
Okay, thank you. I accidentally muted myself. I think that was. So four levels. It sounds 4 or 5, I guess.
There are 4 levels. There are 4 levels of awakening. They're usually called 4. They're called. They're sometimes divided into 8, but 2 different aspects. But they're basically 4 stages. And then there's those. And then there's the 2 kind of leading into that. So they're called faith followers and Dhamma followers that are haven't yet had that breakthrough, but they're going in that direction. Yeah.
And I liked. I think you mentioned when you were speaking earlier. I liked this description you had of how is it that like at one of the levels it's you're not all the way there, but you're starting to let go of greed and hatred, and then the next level is you're not enlightened yet, but you have fully let go of greed and hatred or something like that. Is that correct? Okay. And if you have, are there any references you would recommend for learning more about these, reading about that topic?
I mean, I get them from the suttas, actually. I have it from the suttas, so I don't know. They probably, I'm sure people have written about those things, but I actually don't, I'm not a great reader of digested books. I tend to go straight to the suttas or something particular that interests me. Yeah. So I can't give you a reference, but somebody else might be able to. But throughout the sutras, the Buddha speaks about it again and again.
So
Thank you.
we are getting to the end of our time together, and I will give you the closing word, Ayya, but before that, just a couple of last minute announcements. Just an upcoming event for New York Insight is actually this Sunday with Gina Sharp, who will be doing a sitting on Sunday, I think at 10 o'clock, continuing her talks on fierce love, fierce change in the time of COVID-19, that is. And just a reminder for other events for Buddhist Insights, visit their website, and for other events at New York Insight, visit our website, New York Insights website. And a reminder about Donna and Amit will put the link back up on the chat. I think that's all I need to say at this point, except deep bows of gratitude and how lovely it is to see you. And we look forward to a future return in 3 dimensions.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to go back to New York.
Let's, yeah, we need to finish the tour. Yeah, so I will leave you to close out our evening, and I will ring the bell on this end since I think it'll make it just.
So I'd like to end with, I'd just like to encourage everyone to just look into your heart and mind and appreciate your own practice. So what your practice this evening, practice today, you practice through your life. Even before you knew the word practice in this context, you probably had a bit of a practice going in some way, shape or form. And appreciate your orientation to the Dhamma, and that you're taking a step in the right direction, and then another step, and another step. So just to connect with that in your own heart. So this is merit. This is what we talk about. The punya is a Pali word. It's like a good quality, the energy that grows in one's being, and this supports us in our path to awakening. So part of that is by not harming others, by living ethically, we avoid making unwholesome karma. And then the active good that we do, which can be in many, many different ways. It's this is making good karma, and this is a support for our awakening. And then there's letting go, the moments where the mind lets go and there's peacefulness. This is like the ending of karma. And it's not always, I say there's peacefulness, but it's sometimes the mind lets go in the midst of turmoil. And you're okay with things as they are, even in the midst of turmoil. And this is the karma that leads to the ending of karma. So this is being present with, allowing the process to unfold. So just like you to bring to mind that any of those aspects that you are living. And just let your heart rejoice, modity. Let your heart rejoice in that goodness. Let your heart be filled with the goodness of your practice. That your practice doesn't have to be perfect in order to appreciate it. And I'd like to invite you to share any merits that you may have developed in your life for the benefit of all beings in all realms. May all beings in all realms receive the support and blessings of your practice. May all beings in all realms realize their true nature and be liberated.